6 driven wheels and another pair of wheels which aren't driven. And for those of you who are worried,
give us a number as well. So we use those now for giving people a ride.
From doing it years ago up at Battle Day, a vehicle would disappear behind a hill. There'd be a loud bang, a couple of wheels would fly up. It has a crew of 3. That's the driver, commander, and gunner. The gunner is equipped with, as I say, a 76mm weapon. It's a predecessor of the gun fitted into the Scorpion. It also comes with a coaxial Brown machine gun on the right of the main gun, and sometimes a sort of 30...
For people have nice things to say about the Saladin. It was a very good, very reliable vehicle. And on Saladin in Aden, and twice during one engagement they went back to base to bomb up again. They used that
76mm gun was taken out of service, particularly the Canadians being very careful about health and safety, more perhaps than most are.
It's now one of those most successful vehicles of pretty much all time. Piranha's been sold all around the world, and saved the crew. And you can see the crew compartment well is fairly high up in his own little cab in the front. And again, the whole idea of that is protection for the individuals inside if they should go over a mine.
Now the Buffalo, it's based really on the German Unimog. It's the reconnaissance vehicle for chemical weapons. As it goes along, it can fire those sticks that you can see on the back there, arranged to hinge down vertically, and they're fired into the ground to mark the extent of a contaminated area.
Own version on display just in front of our Vehicle Conservation Centre, which is the anti-tank version.
Searchlight mounted over it, and it has a very high sort of cupola for the commander, which rotates separately and has its own gun, a machine gun in the front. The tank has torsion bar suspension, but like all American vehicles of this period, it's now driven on the rear sprocket. Originally, you'll find the wartime vehicles will be shown later on, that the engine drives through a sprocket. And then they have the sprocket front turning track. Now it's at the back, which is more or less what everybody else does. Use radios.
So mentioning, as we said before, about mines, it's actually got a rounded hull underneath. Again, the idea to dissipate blast. Millimetre. It was designed in the 1950s. They designed it for the 8-inch gun and a 175mm gun, and it's a way of taking artillery around the battlefield. It's a relatively small vehicle. They initially hoped it was going to be air portable. You could get this on 1 or 2 of the larger transport planes. And as you can look at it, you can see it's got a whopping great spade on the back. And the idea is when it steps, the that spade is dropped in the ground at the top there. And in Britain, of course, we designed the Conqueror tank just at the same time. And the idea behind these tanks was really to have a super heavy, well-protected tank with a massive 120mm gun. This is the same gun that's on our Conqueror tank. And they were supposed to be in a sort of overwatch position. If the Russian tanks had attacked, these were supposed to be on the hill somewhere, slightly back from the front line, picking off Russian tanks before they got nearer our main frontline tanks, such as the M48 in the American Army or in the British Army, the Centurion tanks.
Like that. Notice also how the commander is right at the back of the cupola, with only a limited amount of vision of what's going on.
Now the tank museum here, we're very lucky. We have a wonderful range of American vehicles in the collection. And an American call we recognise place of deposit. And what is we do there? The Americans would love us down Labour. Really, around the world, that's what's holding it up. But we even had a reply from the White House saying they're on the case. So with any luck, 1 year, sometime soon, we hope, you'll be able to see not only this parade of American vehicles, but it should be followed up by an M1 Abrams.
And if you see the Abrams, you'll realise how tanks have changed shape quite dramatically.
As I mentioned before, one of the advantages of material coming to the museum and not being scrapped or sold off is it means it is available, still for analysis, still for study, and if necessary in this case, to get...
フリーテイクかと思ったっつってジープ小さいね
The 5mm gun we've seen earlier, we'll see again driving around the museum, in case countries that have bought the Type 59 would like to upgrade to the classic L7 gun. So it's one of these ones that was taken to trade fairs, touted around as if to say, would you like to come and have your type tanks upgraded to this standard? I don't think it's sold particularly well, so after a certain amount of time, Royal Ordnance kindly gave the vehicle.
Chinese vehicles, they seem to be a lot better made than their Russian equivalent. V12 diesel in the back, it's crosswise mounted in the back. It's actually the same really, except it's the bicycle version as the T54. Same V12 diesel in it. At the moment it's laying a smoke screen by injecting diesel into the exhaust, which is something the Russians rather like doing, and that's why you get a large cloud of smoke from it. It's got torsion bar suspension, it's powered by the V12, and it is to lower the profile, they did away with the loading. Last year the loader has to stand up. The only way to do is to lower the profile and but the country had from a rotary device like a power cell. The Russians actually sort of just turned ammunition and trying to upgrade it. So that's why T-72 has been made in many different variants. Probably about 25,000 actually being used all around the world at the moment. So it's a very introduced. Very low profile, you look at that low profile, so it's a hard time to see a fit. And I would much the same with equipment. They did different variants. Probably getting on the limit for what Bristol type suspension, which is a suspension involving coil springs netted to the side of the tank. It's about the limit of what that would stand. The Comet has a crew of 5, that's 3 men in the turret, a driver, a whole machine gunner in the front. With that gun, it had a 77 gun, which was nearly as effective as the old 17-pound gun.
Barb was first designed in the Second World War. It's built in the German chassis with a replica bar. Some of you may have noticed it in one of our car parks. It pulled off as Salisbury Plain. All the German bars that were converted in the Second World War were actually used on D-Day. And we're not 100% certain about our history on this one. We do know it was on Fearless and Intrepid during its life. But if arguably one of the best tanks ever made, this is the British Centurion tank that was first, the stipulation seems so unreliable considered, well, compared to American tanks and certainly the German tanks as well. And they put firepower above protection and protection over mobility. These are all things that make up tanks. And the Centurion, they seem to get it right. They've got a fantastic engine in the back. That again was the Meteor engine, as we talked about earlier, the Rolls-Royce Meteor. It started life with a 17-pounder with the L705mm gun, and it went through 13 marks in British Army service. This particular one, technically, we should call it an AVRI, Armoured Vehicle Royal Engineer, because of the end of its life up with a design that can be improved on over time. And again, just like the Spitfire, it can go through quite a number of marks. 13 marks in British Army service. And as David mentioned, still in service. Some variants with the Israelis, they converted them, and the South Africans call it the Holocaust, so they've still got theirs in service. From the outside, it looks very different. They've added extra armour, so it doesn't quite look the same. They've got new diesel engines in the back, but underneath it all is still a vehicle that, when you think about it, was designed originally back in the Second World War.
When it goes on back, it's self-consumed, has no glass shelter, and the glass is basically put in the boot. The system is so realistic. The drawback was it fitted with a manual drive to the engine, and this is a plastic.
When the Charles Iran was deposed from power in the revolution, it became this tank, Challenger 1.
Challenger 1 is probably most famous for the part it played in the First World War, and this is an actual example of a tank in service. This is what this tank is. Quite a modern tank.
This particular tank was mounted by not so long ago. It's filmed for a program with this tank, and we also drove this tank a few years back around the Lord Mayor's Parade in London with the original crew, which was very good. We've got a big archive and library here at the Tank Museum, so it's not just about the kit, it's all about as well the men who served in those vehicles and the stories that... Now you've noticed as those guns...
They have 6. 7 is said to be the optimum number. Much more possible. And for the minute you've got a Swiss tank going around, which is unusual in itself. The Swiss actually built the Panzer 60 and 61 as indigenous Swiss designs, which is quite remarkable because they were using British tanks at the same time. But the tank has everything unique about it to switch through. It had the right profile to get through railway tunnels. It's armed with the British 105mm gun, has the 8-cylinder MCU engine in the back, and it has quite a weird suspension system. It looks like the picture, it looks like Gordon Royal Spring. It's actually coming back with a load of
off the museum. So in weirdly, there's actually a couple of these Kansas 61s in the UK owned by museums and in very good driving order. Swiss now have Leopard in service. So that tank that looked like a wedge of cheese with a gun squeezed in the front of it, that was to man points on these roads that were heading east-west, so you could have a tank in a hold-down position. And this tank is designed very much with water mobility in mind. This can actually cross those lakes in Sweden, amphibious vehicle, thin armour, and it really sort of dates back to that tank destroyer sort of period in the Second World War, where it's a relatively powerful gun on a very lightweight because that's all they thought it would need to suppress enemy fire, enemy positions, and allow our infantry to advance onto the target.
The infantry tank Mark 1's powered by a Ford V8 engine.
スーパーセブン的な存
This
在
one we swapped it over. We had to get this restored from a wreck, and it's using a Rover engine now. It only has a two-man crew. The driver, obviously down in the front, and the gunner commander in the hurricane machine. It's a very limited against Germans in fixed positions. It's the Germans, the Russians, they went on that fixed position.
The next tank coming on, this one is one of those tanks that actually came to our rescue early in the war. This is the American Stuart, this particular version, M3A1 version of their light tank. It started stuck, so in British service a number of these were called Honeys. The official name, we called them after American generals, so officially it was a Stuart M3. Designed by the Americans as really a light tank, when they came into British service, we were using them almost as infantry tanks or as cruiser tanks, rushing forward in waves to attack with such very heavy casualties.
Stuart, powered by a 7-cylinder Continental Raven engine in the back, basically like an aircraft. The suspension is reversing the Liverpool bird, and that appears on a white square with next to it the red and white number showing its position in the
Starts off with a 2-pounder gun, so a relatively small gun. This is a later model, the Mark 9 model, and it's actually got a bob there at one point. Fairly empty inside, but it was restored by Vickers some years ago. Now the next vehicle coming on to the arena, it's a guest vehicle, privately owned, and has been brought here, a bit of a rarity. I had a bit of engine trouble yesterday, but hopefully it'll make it around the vehicle. This coming on now is the Russian T-34, and this particular model, T-34/85, 85mm gun. It's got the bigger turret and the bigger gun on that was in use later in the Second World War. And it's often picked on as a classic example of Russian tank design. Sleek armour, very good reliable engine, is in the markings of Polish forces, post-war Polish forces, and produced in tremendous numbers in the Second World War and carried on being produced after World War II as well.
It's powered by a V12 diesel, and again it's the same diesel in its uprating. They're never going to win the war with tanks like that.
でもある意味ビビるねこれ。ああ。
famously, when T-34 was captured on the Eastern Front by the Germans, it was taken to Berlin, and Albert Speer got the German arms manufacturers to have a closer look at it. And after they stopped winning, they realised it was a very effective design. And there was at one point where the Germans actually thought they might numbers that counted. However good your tank is, you're swamped by larger numbers, you're going to lose.
Now we've got a number of Shermans to show. 8 suspension, which came a bit later in Sherman design, but it's typical of those days. We've left the tank stowed as impressive indeed. In fact, the diesel had every choice, because there are 3 or 4 different versions of the petrol engine Sherman, and only one of the diesel, so they always have the odds on their side.
The Sherman story is also one we're very pleased that the tank is in, because we've actually got in our collection the oldest German in existence. That's Michael. You can see that German inside our new tank factory exhibition. That was the second Sherman off the production line. And again, it was this genius for American production in the Second World War. They started very quickly with a privately owned Sherman, and again, it shows some of those different characteristics. It's got the shorter, earlier war 75mm gun, the one that's on the mound in the middle of you, the Fury, in size of the whole of the barrel, but that higher velocity, longer gun had much more punch behind it.
The Sherman, when the British first encountered it, was what we'd really been asking for ages in the desert, was a dual-purpose gun, which had an armour-piercing capability and an ability to fire high explosives, which is something we've been doing well for indeed. And that's what singled the Sherman out and made it a great favourite with British crews.